Hello students! So this video here is going to be about solving quadratic equations using quadratic formula, and this is going to be part 1. In this particular video I'm just going to share with you a few of the basics that you need to know for when you're working with the quadratic formula and when you're trying to solve using quadratic formula, and of course we'll do a second video showing you examples too. But there's important information that you need to know from this video, of course, or else I wouldn't be making it. So first off, you need to know exactly what the quadratic formula is. The quadratic formula is an equation that we can use to solve really any quadratic equation, as long as that quadratic equation is written in standard form and is set equal to 0. The quadratic formula can be used to solve that equation. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, I know that's a mouthful. You are expected to remember and know this quadratic formula by heart, commit it to memory. This is one thing that and I believe that even though they do give you a formula sheet on the final exam, they don't have many formulas on that formula sheet, and the quadratic formula, this one, is not one of the formulas that they do put on that answer sheet, if I'm not mistaken. But again, you will need to remember this. There's a song that that some people sing to help them remember the quadratic formula, and I guess different people might make up different versions of whatever. Some people might sing rap songs or something like that. If you want a rap song, you can make up one yourself. But the version of a song that I know that's just to help you remember the quadratic formula goes like this: negative b, negative b. And so it's a call and response type of song. So it's like where one person does the call and everybody else repeats it. So if you hear me saying it twice, that's why. Negative b, plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a, all over 2a. One more time. Negative b, plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a, all over 2a. All right, there's a lot of little songs that have that little tune, little children's songs, like Brother John, or Vera Jacra. I don't know all of the songs, but anyway. Another little memory thing that I've heard of when people are trying to remember the quadratic formula. I've heard some folks tell this little story here. So this is the story about the negative boy. Now, everything I'm about to write about this, I am going to erase it after I tell you the story. So this is the story about the negative boy. And again, negative boy is your negative b. Okay? So there was this negative boy, and he couldn't quite decide. Okay, plus or minus. So this negative boy couldn't quite decide whether or not he wanted to go to this radical party. So negative boy couldn't quite decide whether or not he wanted to go to this radical party. Okay, so This boy was a square. For those who don't know what a square is, well, okay, of course you see which part of the formula it is, but for those who don't know the terminology, a square is somebody who just, and nothing wrong with being a square. A square is somebody who just he's not going to do too much. He's not going to do a whole lot of stuff that's out there. Not going to do a whole lot of partying and things like that. So this boy right here, he was a square. Okay, he didn't go. He ain't go. He didn't go to the party. This one here, this boy, and ain't nothing wrong with being a square, but this one here, this boy, yeah, he ain't go. No, he was a square. Alright, so he didn't go, and he wound up missing out, minus. He wound up missing out on 4 awesome chicks. 4 awesome chicks. Let's recap. So there was this negative boy, and he couldn't quite decide about whether or not he wanted to go to this radical party. But you know what? This boy was a square. He was a square. He ain't go. He didn't go. And he wound up missing out on 4 awesome chicks. Now by the time that he realized, you know, what a big mistake that he had made, the party, y'all, I'm telling you, the party was all over. All over. All over. The party was all over. Divided by. The party was all over by 2 a.m. 2 a.m. Alright, so again, folks, that's just a little something that I've heard that may help some folks remember the quadratic formula. And again, that is the story of the negative boy. And again, the other thing was that song, negative b plus or minus square root. Alright, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, all right. So next, it's important for us to remember when we can actually use the quadratic formula. Again, as promised, I'm erasing all of that. I'm erasing it. It's important for us to know when we can actually use the quadratic formula. So again, the quadratic formula, it can be used to solve any type of quadratic equation. However, guys, that quadratic equation has to be written in a certain form. So even though it can be used to solve any type of quadratic equation, that equation has to be written in a particular form, in a particular way. So the way that a quadratic equation has to be written in order for you to use the quadratic formula is that it's got to be written in standard form, and it has to be equal to 0. So again, the quadratic formula can only be used if the equation is set equal to 0 on one side, and the other side of the equation must be in standard form. For those who don't remember what standard form of a quadratic equation or what standard form of a quadratic expression looked like, again, it's got to be in this form: ax squared. Ooh, that's a sloppy looking squared. Let's try that again. Ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, it can either look like that with the 0 on the right side, or it can look like this with 0 on the left side. Does it matter whether 0 is on the right side or the left side? Not at all. As long as one side of the equation is equal to 0, and you got all 3 terms on the other side in standard form. Remember, standard form for a polynomial is where the exponents for the variable is ordered from the highest to the lowest. So the order of the exponent should be x squared, x to the first power, and then just your constant term. So again, that is when we can use the quadratic formula. Y'all, right now we gonna go ahead on and we gotta go ahead on and shift. We gotta go ahead on and shift on over here, man. All right, so we gotta go ahead on and get our pregame on. I mean, for real, we need to go ahead on and get our pregame on. We gotta prep for this quadratic formula. I mean, for real, y'all. This is serious. This ain't no game. This ain't no game. Okay, I mean, maybe it is. I mean, if it's a game, we gonna win. You know what I mean? I need to see your game face. For real. I'm serious. You know, I mean, what they say? We ready. We ready. We ready for life. We ready. We ready. We ready for this formula. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Hey hey hey. I think that's the wrong song. We will rock you. We will rock you. Take me out to the ball game. Da, 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 da. It's the eye of the tiger and whatever song you want to go, whatever song you want to fit this mood. But we got to get ready for the game. We got to get ready for this. Okay, this is serious. Okay, we doing the quadratic formula here, and so there's certain things that we need to know in order for us to. And I know some of y'all are thinking like, did he really just do all of that? Seriously? But there are certain things that we need to know and certain steps that we need to take when we're using the quadratic formula. And so I just want to go through some of that pregame, prepping you for when we actually working out problems using the quadratic formula. Alright, so here it goes. Step 1. Let's make sure our equation is equal to 0. Make sure it's set equal to 0. And make sure that it's in standard form. Make sure it's in that form, ax squared plus bx plus c, where your exponents are ordered from the highest to the lowest. X squared coming first, then your x to the first power, and then your constant term. So it's got to be set equal to 0. Got to be in standard form. If it's not, you're going to have to do some algebra, rearrange some things, move all of your terms to one side of the equation, and make sure that they're in the right order so that the other side is equal to 0. Next, you've got to identify your a, b, and c from the form ax squared plus bx plus c. After you've identified your A, your B, and your C, exactly what those coefficients are, and that constant term, your A, B, and C, then you need to calculate the discriminant. Put a pin in that. Put a pin right there in what discriminant is. Because we're going to come back to that. Okay, so the discriminant is a certain part of the quadratic formula, and if you look at the quadratic formula up above, where you see the part that says b squared minus 4ac, it is that part that is up under the square root. That part that's up under the square root. In other words, it's your radicand. The part up under the square root, the part that you're taking the square root of, And so you're going to calculate that expression b squared minus 4ac. That is what we refer to as the discriminant. Alright, so after you have calculated the discriminant, you need to calculate the negative b. You need to calculate that. So if you look at the formula closely, there's part of the formula up there that reads negative b, right? And we talked about that, negative boy. But again, you need to calculate negative b. That sounds easy enough, but a lot of folks think that means, a lot of people think that negative b, a lot of people think that means that whatever you write there has to be negative. And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that negative b has to be a negative number that's written there. When you see the negative b written there in that formula, that really stands for the opposite of b. In other words, the opposite sign of b. So whatever sign b actually has, you're going to write negative b, or the opposite sign. You're going to write that same number, but you're going to write it with the opposite sign. Okay? So if it was positive, you're going to make it negative. But if it was negative, you're going to write it as a positive in the formula. The opposite of b. And also, you're going to calculate the 2a, and of course that's just how it sounds. Of course, for 2a you multiply 2 times whatever the value of a is, right? But again, a lot of people forget to actually multiply the value of a times 2. A mistake that a lot of people make is they'll just put 2 at the bottom of the quadratic formula, and instead of multiplying 2 times whatever the value of a is. For instance, if the value of a was 3, you should have 2 times 3 at the bottom, which is 6. But again, a lot of people make the mistake of no matter what the value of a is, of just putting 2 at the bottom. Or some people only put the value of a at the bottom, but you have to multiply that value of a times 2 at the bottom. And again, like I said, that sounds pretty simple, but I've seen people make mistakes even when they're looking at the formula head on. Alright, so guys, these pre-gaming steps for using the quadratic formula are very, very, very important. I can't stress it enough how important they are. If you don't master these pre-gaming steps, there's no way that you're going to be able to get any right answer from doing the quadratic formula. Even if you simplify everything right, if you mess up one of these parts, there's no way you're going to get it right. So again, it's very important that you do these here, and do them correctly. Again, we can work on the simplifying and writing it in its simplest radical form, and we can even work on you writing your answers in a decimal form if you filled in everything right, and if you've done these pre-gaming steps right. Alright, so the last thing that we want to talk about here on this particular video is, again, a little bit more about the discriminant and actually what that discriminant can actually help us to determine. So again, we said the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that represents the radicand, or it represents the number under the square root. But again, that discriminant, depending on what that actual number is up under the square root, it can tell us certain things about the quadratic equation, and it can tell us certain things about the solutions. So the things that the discriminant or the radicand can determine is that the radicand can pretty much tell you the number and the type of solutions that you're going to have. So again, if you know what the radicand is, or for the quadratic formula, we call that the discriminant, the part that's up under the square root, or the number that you're taking the square root of. So what that discriminant can determine is how many solutions you're going to have and what type of solutions you're going to have. So there are three different there are three different options that you have when we're dealing with the discriminant. The discriminant, which is the number that's up under the square root, it can either be a positive number when you calculate it, or the discriminant could be 0 when you calculate it, or the discriminant could be a negative number when you calculate it. So again, you could either have a positive number as the discriminant, 0 as the discriminant, or a negative number as the discriminant. And depending on which of those three, positive number, 0, or a negative number, depending on which of those three the discriminant is, it will help you to determine how many solutions and what type of solutions the equation has. Who put that up there? All right, so yeah, yes, that's where those pictures came from. All right, so here we go, folks. In order for you to determine the number or how many solutions and the type there is, it goes like this. If the discriminant is positive, then there are two real solutions. If the discriminant is negative number, then there are two imaginary solutions. And if the discriminant is 0, then there is only one real solution. Now, I'm going to erase what I'm about to write here, but again, it should sort of kind of make sense. Despite and regardless of the rest of the formula, despite the rest of the formula for the quadratic formula, the part that we really focus on for the discriminant is the number that's up under the square root. So the part that comes right before that is a plus or minus, and then you taking the square root of that discriminant, right? So think of it like this: if you were taking the square root of a positive number, and you're doing like plus or minus, and it's the square root of a positive number, right? Any positive number like 50, okay, just for instance. So the plus or minus, that's where you're going to get your two answers from, because one option is clearly positive or plus, and the other option is clearly minus or negative, right? And so, of course, when we do the square root of a positive number, the result is going to be a real number. So again, we get two solutions because of the plus or minus when you've got when the discriminant is a positive number. And then, of course, because it is the square root of a positive number, is going to be real. When the discriminant is a negative number, just to kind of give you guys a little visual here. When the discriminant is a negative number, remember, anytime you're taking the square root of a negative number, you're going to get imaginary solutions, because again, that's the only time that you can get an imaginary solution is if you have the square root of a negative number. So of course, if the discriminant is negative, or if that radicand, the number up under the radical, is negative, then of course you're going to get imaginary solutions. But of course, the two solutions come from that plus or minus symbol, because again, one option is where you're adding that square root, and the other option is where you're subtracting that square root, plus or minus. And then of course the last option, folks, is where that discriminant is 0. So think about it, right? We all know, or if you don't know, you will know now. We all know that the square root of 0 is nothing but 0. So if you think about it, if you replace that square root of 0 with the number of 0, okay, what happens if you've got a number, like if you got like a set number, right, and you decide to add 0 to it, or if you decide to subtract 0 from it? What happens if you've got a specific number and you add 0 or you subtract 0? Adding 0 or subtracting 0 isn't going to change the value of it, is it? Adding 0. So, okay, let's just say that we had a set number like 20, right? Let's say that everything else in the equation, everything else in the quadratic formula was equivalent to 20. And then when you put the plus or minus this square root of 0 in there, when you add 0 to it or subtract 0 to the number 20, for instance, then it doesn't change. So if the number was already a real number, adding 0 or subtracting 0 from it, there's only going to be one real solution, because again, the plus or minus 0 doesn't give you any other options, because again, adding 0, subtracting 0, it leaves the number the exact same. So again, I just wanted to kind of give you a little visual of that, for those who may have kind of thought that was a little abstract as far as the this description is concerned. But again, if your discriminant is positive, then you're going to have two real solutions. If the discriminant is a negative number, then you're going to have two imaginary solutions. And if your discriminant is 0, then you are going to only get one real solution. Folks, I hope that this video has been helpful to you. Again, in this video, part 1, we just wanted to give you some background information on and some much needed information on the quadratic formula. Again, stick around for part 2, because in part 2 we're going to do some examples where you see some of these things in action. These steps that we've told you that you need to take, like for your pre-gaming, you're going to see that in action when we show you in examples. And then we're going to take it a step further. So this right here, what we showed you in this video was just the pre-gaming for it. We're going to take it even further. We're going to get in the game, and we're going to keep our head in the game. And we're going to show you how to simplify it from there. Even if that means writing it in its simplest radical form, or if it means writing out the decimal form of the answers. But again, I do hope that this video has helped you in some kind of way. But if not, stick around for part 2, and we will work on some examples in that.